Everybody, it's Jeremy. Welcome to a new Dominions 5 video. This is going to be a nation overview for Yomi, the Oni Kings from the early age. As a heads up, this is going to be attached to a series that I did for Yomi. I played them in the Dreamers Game 7, I believe it is, of Lucid's annual tournament from 2021. This is a little bit of a new thing for me, actually. I subbed into this game, I think on turn 24. So this series is going to be a new point for the channel as we kind of like jump into a sub situation, figure out, where are we at, what do we have access to, what can we attempt to do if we can even really do anything, right? So, but that is neither here nor there, because that shouldn't really affect this video too terribly much, this just being the nation overview. That being said, one thing that is going to be slightly different is normally I would do a separate pretender design video. We're not going to do that this time around because I didn't get to design the pretender for this game. So at the end of this video, I'm just going to tack on a short review of this is the pretender we got, and we'll go from there. So, as a caveat, I like to put this in the front of most of my new videos, my new series, right? I am not an expert in Dominions 5. I've been playing the game for a while now. I have a fair amount of experience with the game, but I am by no means an expert player. So, all of what I say, take with a grain of salt. These are just my opinions. Some of them are going to be bad opinions. Some of them might be good opinions. I might get lucky once or twice. But yeah, so if you're interested in this type of content, as a heads up, this is probably more from a casual perspective than an expert's opinion. Okay? So, before we jump into actually reading through the stuff for Yomi and going over their commanders and units and all of that good stuff, I want to take a very brief moment to kind of like encapsulate why might you want to play Yomi. So there's a lot of different. So they're in the early age, right? Early age has the most nations available, I believe. Why would you want to play Yomi out of all of the other nations available? I think it really boils down to 2 or 3 things. So, you might want to play Yomi if you think that samurai, mythical Japan, or that whole kind of like yokai, oni, demon scenario is cool, right? If you think that aesthetic is cool, if you think the lore behind that is cool, if you think the concepts behind that are cool, then you might enjoy playing Yomi, right? And then also kind of like attached to that, but these are the 2 other reasons, is if you like super combatants in Dominions 5, Yomi has one of the best kind of like out-of-the-box super combatant chassis that you can utilize in the Daioni, which is this guy right here. So if the idea of a demon samurai badass super combatant is cool to you, then you might like to play Yomi, right? And then the third thing is the concept of Yomi is a kind of a weird free spawn nation. They have a lot of recruitable stuff, but they have the ability to free spawn a lot of Onis or demons throughout their land. So if the idea of having a bunch of crazy, weird, undisciplined for the most part, demons that cause a lot of unrest and are unruly and tend to not die because they have like an ethereal demon spirit form, if that sounds cool to you, or if the combination of these 3 things sound cool to you, then Yomi might be a nation that you really enjoy. That's the kind of like little elevator sales pitch of why might you want to play Yomi? So if that sounded interesting to you, then yeah, check them out. So now let's go ahead and just read through all of the stuff for Yomi, and then we'll get into actually discussing commanders, units, etc., etc. So Yomi is a land of inhospitable mountains, steaming sulfuric pools, and sudden volcanic eruptions. At the center of this unforgiving land lies a great cone-shaped mountain, at the top of which is an entrance to the netherworld. I cannot read today. I apologize. From this gate, the Oni have come, one by one or in small groups. Oni are demons of the wild, ugly, pot-bellied, and mischievous. They are ruled by Oni Kings, who occasionally emerge from the netherworld to wreak havoc on the land of the living. Oni are almost immortal and must be killed in spirit as well as in body if they are to stay dead. We'll talk about what that means later. They are worshipped by human priests who build profane temple gates through which even more Oni can enter the land. So I like this description. I remember when I first started playing Dominions 5, how I thought a lot of these descriptions were for nations were really, really cool, but they didn't really tell me a whole lot, right? Now, knowing what I do know about Dominions 5, I realize that they're actually telling us a lot. It's just they're being very obtuse about it, right? So a lot of these different things are tagged with information. So we can tell, from the description of their land that it's not an exceedingly pleasant land, or it's not an exceedingly prosperous land, right? We can tell that the Oni are demons, right? They just say that basically right out of the gate. We can tell that there is some special ability that the Onis have, right? We can also tell that there's a way for them to free spawn. So you actually get a lot of information through a lot of these nation descriptions. It can just be difficult to suss out what that information actually is. Okay, so national features. We have the race. They're demons. They have reduced income. We'll go over all of this more in depth, but I'm just going to read through. Reduced income, halved income effects of heat and cold scales, extra gold and resources in cave forts. Military-wise, they have semi-immortal Oni, Bakemono, and human servants. They have light infantry and medium infantry with no sacred troops, or at least no recruitable sacred troops. Magic-wise, they have death, fire, earth, some air, and nature. They have powerful mages, but they are bad at research. And they have some national summons. Priest-wise, they are weak. They have provinces with temples that spawn Oni. And then building-wise, they have primitive forts and temples that cost 200 gold. So I wish that Dominions... so the descriptions for a nation, I like those being vague. I like that being information that you have to suss out, or if you're more experienced, you can be like, oh, this probably means XYZ, right? That I like. National features, I wish they were more explicit with. So, for example, what does reduced income mean? I'll tell you. So, Yomi, as a inhospitable land ruled by demons, has a malice, an inherent malice of minus 25% income right out of the gate. So, period, you will always have 25% less income playing as Yomi than you could as a different nation. Now, to kind of compensate for this, they have a reduced effectiveness, or reduced effect from the income of temperature scales, right? So going outside of your normal temperature range or your preferred temperature range affects Yomi less, which is good, but it's not enough to make up for the minus 25% income, right? And then it also says you get extra gold and resources in cave forts. You do get extra gold and resources in cave forts, but it's not enough. One, it's not enough, and two, there aren't enough caves for that to really matter the vast majority of the time. This is not going to compensate for the fact that you make minus 25% income, okay? And then this is also a great time to talk about this, but they just say demons here. Okay, cool, great. Useful information. But really, there's a lot of inherent information here that's not discussed. So let's pop over to, real quick, let's pop over to the IllWiki. Hey! So before we get too in depth here, I want to shout out the people who work on the IllWiki. This site has come a long way in the past year and a half, I guess maybe. There's a lot more useful information on here than it used to be. Thank you very much to the people who actually go and contribute to the IllWiki. You've done a great job. It's really, really good. So, we've already talked about the minus 25% income penalty, but what I wanted to talk about here is that it doesn't really describe this to you in the in-game scenario, but you are a nation that free spawns demons throughout your land, right? And we'll talk more, we'll have a whole free spawn mechanics section where we talk about what the mechanics actually are and what you free spawn and everything like that. But what I want to touch base on now is that you already have this minus 25% income malice, right? The demons that you free spawn, the Oni, right, are tricksy, turmoil-based entities that increase the unrest in the provinces that they are in, okay? And we can actually see that here in this general overview section, right? It says right here, thirdly, all Oni troops cause unrest, which further decreases their gold income. So, you have a minus 25% income penalty. You free spawn demon troops that increase the unrest in your provinces. And those demon troops have turmoil power, so it encourages you, very, very much encourages you to go turmoil so that they're stronger, meaning that you're going to have a worse time managing that unrest, right? And all that is to say that your gold income is a real problem for Yomi. Sorry, I'm getting over sickness, so I'm probably going to be coughing and sniffling throughout this whole thing. So that is a real issue that you're going to have to deal with while playing Yomi. All right, I'm back. I got cough drops. Hopefully, I'm not going to die coughing now. So, anyways, Yomi has a real problem dealing with their income. Okay, so we'll discuss more on that here or there as we go through things. But minus 25% income. They summon demons. Those demons cause unrest, which fucks with their income more. Those demons have turmoil power, which means you're gonna want to go turmoil, which means you have the reduced income from that period just from going turmoil, but also that you have a harder time dealing with the unrest, which means you're even more impacted from an income standpoint, right? So gold income, upkeep, that's going to be a big problem for Yomi, okay? So, we talked about that. We went through all of these different little sections, but let's actually, again, flip back to the... Yeah, here we go, to the IllWiki. Because I wanted to point out this national features section that they have on the IllWiki. This is really useful information. Not just for like these special sections down here. And not really for, in my opinion, from the race or the military situation. But more for the magic access, the priests and the buildings. So this is really useful, I find. When I used to do nations for the first time, when I used to prep them, I would go through and I would make like a little spreadsheet of what their best access paths were. And the wiki just does all this for you. And it's really, really, really useful. What this rare stuff means, by the way, is it means that it's like you have the ability to get to Fire 4, but it takes a rare what's the random? Gosh, my brain freaking stalled there. It takes a rare random to get that, i.e., you'll have a mage that you can recruit that'll give you 3 fire, and then probably have a chance to like a 10% random for fire. So that's what that means, right? Is you can definitely get 3 fire without much of a hassle. You could, if you got lucky, get fire 4. Sorry, friggin' cough drop trying to make myself not cough. So this is really useful information, and we can kind of see exactly what the spread for Yomi's base paths are. 3 fire, 1 air, 3 earth, 4 death, which is really good, and 1 nature. So basically no water out of the gate, which is interesting. Very low nature out of the gate, which is also interesting. And pretty low air out of the gate, which is unfortunate. Good fire, good earth, great death. No blood, really, and no astral. So very narrow in their focus, but their focus is pretty good where it's at. Okay? Really shitty priests, but they have very cheap temples. So probably going to want a lot of temples because those temples free spawn Onis. And then they have very primitive forts. And I don't think it actually mentions this in the game. Does it? It says primitive forts, right? But I don't know if this is the case for everyone that has primitive forts. Maybe that's just what primitive forts means. But the forts for Yomi only generate 1 commander point. So everywhere that is not your capital, or I guess other capitals or other forts that you take over from other players, right? Every fort that you put down is a shitty little palisade that you only get 1 commander out of, and it takes 2 turns to recruit any of your real commanders or mages. And that is painful. That is very painful. So we'll talk more about that as we're going through the actual units. But that's a real issue that you have to deal with from Yomi. So, you have income issues, you have fortification issues, but to kind of like compensate for that, you have some narrow focused magic, but really good in that narrow focus. You have free spawn demons, and you have really strong chassis, right? A super combatant chassis kind of come out of it. So, before we go through the commanders or units, let's take a look at their site. They start with the Mountain of Kings. So this is that spiral cone-shaped mountain, right? Gives you Death 3, Fire 1, Earth 1, Air 1. So a nice little spread there. And it enables the recruitment of Daionis. So you only have the 1 capital-only unit, which is nice, but that cap only unit is really, 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 really important. So let us check my handy dandy note pad over here. I think we're ready to just jump into things. So we're gonna jump into the units now. So I'm gonna go through recruitable units, recruitable commanders. Then we'll go through the free spawn that we get out of the nation, and then we'll go through the national spells, which will include a lot of national summons, right? So, yeah, that should be fun. So let's jump into the recruitable units. Recruitable units for Yomi are broken out into 2 different sections. You have the Bakemono Show, and then you have the Human Bandits, right? Each of these is basically the same. The only thing that really changes is the weapon involved, right? So between the Bakemono Show, they have clubs. You have the Bakemono Show with Yaris, and then you have the Bakemono Show archers with short bows and daggers, right? So what are the Bakemono Show? So they are little ghostly goblins in the mountain realms of Yomi and Shinigami. Notable point, they are not Oni, Okay, so these are not undead, these are not demons, these count as living regular units. And that is really important to know because that means they have supply issues. They have things like that that you don't have to deal with on undead or demons. You do have to deal with them on these. Okay, they are very cheap. They're even cheaper if you recruit them in mountain because they have mountain recruitment too. They cost almost no resources, almost no recruitment points. They have very shitty stats, but they are size 1 and they're super cheap, so they're very high attack density, very massable. They are undisciplined, which is a pain in the ass. They have dark vision 50, which can be very useful if you're doing some dark vision plays. And then they are stealthy, so that's pretty cool. If you are going to use Bakemono Sho, which isn't a bad idea, because again, they are very cheap, they are stealthy, you can do some raid shenanigans with them, right? But if you are going to use them, you should use the Bakemono Sho Yari variant. The Yari is a 4, 11, 15 versus the Club, which is a 1, 10, 12. So the Yari has better attack, higher damage, and the chance to repel. And all it costs is 1 additional resource point. And I sincerely doubt, like, you're not going to be... The issue with getting a shit ton of Bakemono Sho isn't going to be resource points. It's going to be either recruitment points or gold. So if you're going to use Bakemono Sho, use the Yari version, not the Club version, right? And then you also have access to the Archer version. These are kind of like pygmies in the fact that, like, if you want to do some shenanigans with massable fire arrow archers, then Bakemono archers can be useful then. If you don't want to do that, then they are not useful ever at all, basically. I say that they can be somewhat okay if you're up against a nation that doesn't have helmets, right? These guys are really, really cheap if you have the extra money to spend, which we probably won't because you're Yomi. But if you do, then these guys can be useful for that situation. But typically, unless you're doing something with fire arrows, you're not going to be using these. So, aside from your Bakemono Sho, this cough drop is not pleasant. If you're not going to be using Bakemono Sho, your other option are human bandits. So, these guys don't have the benefit of being size 1, so they don't have the crazy high attack density. And then if you compare that, right, then everything else about them is basically worse, right? They are very average across the stat humans, which are better than Bakemono Sho, obviously, right? But they also cost significantly, right? Cost way more gold, cost way more resources, cost more recruitment points. And you don't get all of the benefits that you would for Bakemono Sho. You don't get the fact that they're size 1 and have super high attack density. You don't get the dark vision, etc. You don't get the little survivals that they have. Bakemono Sho have like mountain survival and forest survival, I think. Bandits just have stealthy, and that's it, right? They have no shields. They have a Yari. It's okay. I cannot, with the fact that you have such income problems with Yomi, more often than not, I can never really come up with an idea of why you want to use the bandits. You might be forced into using the bandits sometimes, but I can't think of when you might really want to use the bandits. I guess if you have some pillager strategy that actually works, I think pillager is a system that doesn't really work in the game and needs to be either removed or rebalanced. But if you have some pillager strategy that you have as a secret, by all means, there you go. And then the bandit also has a bow version. If you want bows, probably just go with the Bakemono Shos. The only flip side is the Bakemono Shos are undisciplined, so you can't script what you want them to do, kind of like who you want them to target. So if you really need that, if you need to be able to script your bows, The bandits with short bows can, I guess, work, but they're really expensive for what you're gonna be getting, and I don't think it's really worthwhile. My God, this cough drop. Okay, so that's all that you have from a recruitable unit line, and it's very bare bones, right? But keep in mind you're gonna have free spawn units, and the free spawn units are the main units that you're actually going to be using as a military army. Okay, so that's going to be it for the recruitable units. Let's talk about recruitable commanders. So we have a Bakemono chief, which is the basically just the chief version of the Bakemono, right? Like has all of the same things. He also operates as your scout. So from a leader standpoint, this guy's actually pretty good. He's a nice, cheap leader, meaning from a scout standpoint, he's kind of bad. He's an expensive scout. So you gain something and lose something. So if you can luck into a scout province in your base territory, use those for scouts instead. If you can't, then you'll have to use Bakemono chiefs for your scouts. Otherwise, you use these guys when you need to for base leadership for regular units. Which can be useful for if you're trying to like elf someone with Bakemono Show or bandits or something like that. Just use your Bakemono chief. There's almost no reason to like use the bandit leader. The bandit leader is more expensive. He doesn't have better stealth. He has barely more survivability. Actually, 10 protection versus 12 HP versus 12 protection versus 9 HP. So the bandit leader has slightly more protection but less HP than the Bakemono Show does. So I don't know. They both have 40 leadership. Use whichever one you think you want to use. I think it's kind of silly to use the bandit leaders at all, because unless you have some pillager tactic that really works for you, then there's no reason to use the bandit leaders. Just use the Bakemono Show. Okay. That brings us to our first caster of the bunch. We have demon priests. These guys can be recruited outside of the forts. So anywhere that you have a temple, you can recruit a demon priest. There are 50 gold, 1 resource, 1 recruitment point. And I will point out the recruitment points because we have primitive forts, so we only have 1 commander point per turn in those primitive forts. So that means you can get a demon priest once per turn, whereas most of your people it takes 2 turns to get. These guys are H1, so very, very low priest level. They are sacred, and they have a 10% random in fire, air, earth, and death, which is not really useful or worthwhile to discuss at all. The demon priests are not incredibly useful. I've found 3 main uses for them. If you are up against something where you need a shit ton of priests, then sure, you can mass the demon priests. They're not especially expensive from a gold purpose. They're not great priests, but again, if you're going up against like some strong undead nation, sure, use the demon priests, right? That's reason 1 that you might want to use them. Reason 2 that you might want to use them is they are one of your only units that can bless. So demon priests can bless, and then your Daionis can bless. None of your other people have any priest paths to bless with. So if you need to bless something, most often you might need to bless an Oni Shugo because they are sacred, but they are not priests. So if you need to bless something like an Oni Shugo, then a demon priest can be a good thing. Other than that, though, they're not very useful when it comes to their blessing abilities. Okay, and then the third thing that you might want to use them for is putting up temples across your lands. Right? We have very cheap temples. Lands that we have temples in, again, we'll talk more about the free spawn mechanics when we get to the free spawn, but lands that we have temples in, free spawn Oni. So you're going to want a couple of demon priests at the beginning of the game to go around and put temples in your provinces to free spawn those demons. And then after you're kind of done doing that, you're not really going to want any more demon priests. And you can use the demon priests that you have to ferry around demons. Because, like we said, Oni cause unrest in the provinces that they're in. So you don't want to just leave them there. You want to collect them into provinces that you don't care about the unrest in, right? And these guys, they only have 10 leadership when it comes to that, but if you're constantly ferrying them back and forth, 10 can be enough. If you can raise this through a bless, right, to give them more undead leadership, but I find that to be unnecessary more often than not. But it is possible. And you might have an idea or a strategy to go that route. But that's really the only reasons to use Demon Priest, right? If you need a bunch of priests, you can use them then. If you really need to bless some stuff, you can use them in a pinch, right? And you need to put a couple of temples down at the beginning of the game, and then ferry units around. Those are the reasons why you use a couple Demon Priests. Other than that, not really going to be massing these guys. Okay. Next up, we have our 2 base casters. We have the Naminari, which can be recruited in all highlands and mountains. So they can be recruited in any fort that has a laboratory, or any highland and mountain that has a laboratory. That's pretty useful because you can, again, keep in mind, your forts only have 1 commander point, and your forts are expensive. You only have so much money that you can utilize as Yomi. So if you find a place like a highland or mountain where you don't have to put down a fort, you can just put down a lab. You can start shoveling out Naminaris in that location without the need to put a fortification down. So that can be kind of useful. So let's take a look at the Naminari. They are 65 gold, 2 recruitment points, 1 death, 1 nature. They are your only base nature access, okay? They have 9 research, which is pretty decent from an efficiency standpoint. Mountain survival, swamp survival, and supply bonus 10. So the Naminari are actually your best research efficiency, gold to research efficiency units. So if you are wanting to mass something for research, it is typically going to be the Naminari. Unfortunately, the Naminari is also probably your least effective combat mage compared to the sorcerer or the Oni Shugo, which they're just both generally better combat mages than the Naminari, except for a few very specific like purposes. So the Naminari, obviously, as a nature 1, can be a swarm caster. That can be super useful in a couple of situations. I swear to God, this freaking cough won't go away. So that can be useful in a couple of situations, but for the most part, Naminaris are here to be research monkeys, and that's pretty much it. The only counter to that is that there is a national spell that we'll go over later that transforms the Naminari into a better questionable question mark unit. And we'll discuss that when we get there. So that's the Naminari. And then the counterpart to the Naminari is the Sorcerer. So 150 gold versus 65 gold. 11 research versus 9 research. So way less research efficient. But instead of being death nature, they are earth death with 100% on fire, air, earth, or death. So they can be Earth 2s or Death 2s, and those Earth 2s or Death 2s are going to be way better combat mages than a Death 1 or a Nature 1 from the Naminaris are. So these guys are way less research efficient, but they are way better combat mages. So what ends up happening here, from what I've seen, because I've played Yomi twice, and I've seen Yomi played in a lot of different games. What I see happen the most ends up being very dependent on what you do with your scales. i.e., if you go drain, if you go neutral, or if you go magic, right? If you go drain on Yomi, which I don't know that I recommend, right? But if you go drain on Yomi, they have absolutely horrible research. So take Drain 3, for example. That means you have a Naminari that is researching at 6 research for 65 gold, or you have a Sorcerer that is researching at 8 research for 115 gold. That's really, really bad. Conversely, if you go magic scales, the 65 gold Naminari is actually really, really efficient. Fruit fly. I swear to God, it's either me coughing or something in my face, or like the world just wants me to fail here. Anyways, the Naminari can be very, very research efficient if you go magic scales. I find more often than not that the best thing for Yomi is probably just to go neutral on the magic side of things, because going drain is incredibly harmful to their research, but going magic is too much of an investment. They want other shit, basically. So going magic is really hard to accept or to justify, basically. Anyways, so sorcerers, golden efficient from a research standpoint, but they are better combat mages. They don't break you into anything special, so you don't have to worry about that. And they are old, so you're probably not going to want a whole bunch of them. But it kind of depends on, are you producing sorcerers for your research? Because they're going to be more useful when you're not researching. Or are you producing Naminaris for your research because they're more efficient, but they're going to be less useful? Next up, we have the Demon General, who is 125 gold, research 7, death 1. So, absolutely horrible efficiency for research there. This guy really only exists because he is your best leader. He has 120 leadership. Keep in mind, though, this is 120 leadership for regular living units. He only has 70 leadership when it comes to undead units. What that means, though, is that means he gets a +2 squad morale bonus for up to 4 squads. Even to the undead, but he can only lead 70 undead units. This is still really valuable, though, because a lot of your free spawn units, the Onis in particular, have really low morale. So you can use Demon Generals in conjunction with items like Horns of Valor to kind of prop up that morale so that they don't just instantly break all the damn time. A really useful unit for leading troops, but very expensive for research points, and you're not really getting much out of them aside from leading troops around. So you're going to want a couple of these, but not very many, basically. And then we get into our two kind of special units, right? So we have the Oni Shugo and the Daioni. Oni Shugo can be recruited in any fort with a temple and a lab, which is important because these guys are useful for a lot of different things, and they have a lot going on. So we're gonna spend a lot of time talking about them. But fortunately, a lot of the things we're gonna talk about are going to be carried over into the Daioni, so it won't be wasted time. So first off, these guys are pretty expensive. 195 gold, 38 resources. They are a Death 2 mage out of the gate, and they have 100% random for fire, air, and earth. So these guys make horrible researchers. 7 research. They actually have inept researcher, right? So they actually make horrible researchers. However, you might still want a fair amount of them for a couple reasons. One of those reasons is that they are Death 2 out of the gate. And Death 2 mages are good mages. Those are hordes of skeleton casters, right? The other reason is that these guys are actually really good thugs out of the gate. They have base protection of 21, they have 30 HP, they're size 3, decent stats across the board, and they are Oni. They are your demons. So, they have a special ability that when they die, they become an ethereal unit. So they drop to 0 HP. Instead of dying, they turn into an ethereal unit, and you have to kill them again. Now, if they are up against something like magic weapons, or something that has a bunch of really good magic evocations or things like that, like attack magic, it doesn't really matter, they'll get killed anyways. But if they are not up against something like that, they can fight a whole bunch of just indies or regular province defense without much of an issue, especially since, again, they are sacred. So if you have a good bless, these guys can do a lot as long as you can get them blessed. So, bad researchers, good-ish combat mages, right? Very good thugs, and to top matters, they also have this special ability over here, Oni Summoner. So this unit has a chance of attracting one or more co-Oni per month. So basically, these guys can help increase the rate of free spawn that you have, which is very, very valuable, right? They also cause unrest, and they have chaos power, so that's all very interesting. They're demons, so they don't eat. They have snow move, etc., etc. I'm not going to go over every single little bitty ability because I think most people know that type of stuff at this point. So, and if you don't, like I said at the beginning, right, there are better versions that go more in depth into those types of details. You can watch those. Okay. Another special thing about the Oni Shugo, and this is the same for the Daioni, is that they summon wolves at the start of every battle. So they summon 1d6 wolves. This is pretty useful for allowing them to buff themselves, to go through a buff cycle. The wolves can catch fast units like cavalry or things like that, and bog them down, giving the Oni Shugo a little bit of time to get some spells off before they get in. There's that. Okay, so that was a whole bunch of different stuff. Let's go back across the Oni Shugo from the top. Expensive at 195 gold for a gold-starved nation. Really good stats across the board. Those stats make them very effective thugs. They're decent combat mages. Very good thug mages, generally speaking, with Death 2 being very valuable from a Hordes of Skeletons standpoint, but also Air 1 and Earth 1 are pretty valuable from a thugging standpoint, especially Earth 1, right? Iron Skin, Temper Flesh, Iron Will, all achievable from Earth 1, right? They are sacred, but they can't bless themselves, and they help summon more free spawn into your provinces. So, very valuable unit, very expensive unit, but as you're going to have to balance what you're recruiting so that you don't have horrible research, right? But if you can do that, you also want to weave in Oni Shugos wherever you can because they're really valuable units, okay? And again, we didn't really cover that too terribly much. But again, Oni are almost immortal. If their body is slain, their spirit will survive. You have to actually kill the spirit form as well. So, let's talk about Daioni now. So this is the big reason to play Yomi. This is the creme de la creme. These are one of the best super combatant chassis out of the gate that you can get in the game, period. And they're really, really cool. So they are very expensive, 490 gold. is that's very expensive for a nation that has a lot of gold, and Yomi does not have a lot of gold. So you're going to want as many Daionis as you can get as Yomi, but the amount of Daionis that you can get as Yomi is it's going to be rough, right? You're going to have to be thinking about, okay, how do I afford Daionis and what am I using them for? How am I making that worthwhile, basically? So what are you getting for 490 gold? You're getting 50 HP, which is very good. You're getting a pretty damn good stat line. Protection 19 out of the gate, 18 magic resistance, which is pretty good, 18 morale, which is okay. Good strength at 20, attack 14, defense 13, combat speed 20. So these guys have a very good stat line. They are size 4, which is somewhat awkward. Size 4 is that size where it is just big enough to cause problems, but not big enough to solve a lot of problems. I.e., you can still get trampled by a lot of things at size 4. You can still get eaten by a lot of things at size 4. So this size 4 doesn't really do the Daioni a lot of favors. But aside from that, you get Fire 2, Earth 2, and Death 3 out of the gate with a Holy level, a Priest level, and a 100% random for Fire, Air, Earth, or Death, and a 10% random for the same. So, every single Daioni that you get is going to either be a Fire 3, Earth 3, Death 4, or Air 1 random at a minimum, okay? This makes them incredibly valuable. They are very, very good at thugging or being super combatants. With no gear at all, and no bless out of the gate, right? A Daioni can actually kick the shit out of a lot of things. Just because they have the ability to put things like Iron Skin or Temper Flesh up, just because they have the ability to put things like Soul Vortex up or Fire Shield up or things like that, right? Fire is actually one of the unfortunate parts here. Let's flip over to the wiki. I think the wiki talks about this. Yeah, so the wiki, where are we at? Yeah, here we go. So, unfortunately, Daioni will transform into their Oni Spirit wounded shape before Phoenix Pyre takes active, making this spell less impressive than it might seem at first. So, I know a lot of people, when they see something like Fire 2 on a chassis like this, they're going to be like, oh yeah, Phoenix Pyre, hell yeah. Especially in conjunction with Soul Vortex. But, unfortunately, that doesn't work for Daioni. But even discounting that, right? Like, Earth, really strong for keeping them alive. Death, really strong for keeping them alive. Fire, less strong for keeping them alive, but can still be very good, especially from a casting standpoint. Just having them, be able to do things like, flaming arrows for pygmy, or not pygmy, but Bakemono traps, right? Or being able to do things like big fire evocations or summoning fire elementals, right? It's still a very useful path for them to have, and there are a couple of other buffs that are pretty useful in it. So the other big thing about Daioni out of the gate is that they come with fear, right? So having such a good stat line, being sacred, having a crazy amount of HP, being able to bless themselves, being able to buff themselves, and then having built-in fear makes them really, really good at routing high amounts of province defense, really strong indie provinces, or even small armies or even big armies that are unprepared to deal with them, right? Now, if your enemy is prepared to deal with them, there are a lot of ways to deal with Daioni, but if your enemy is prepared to deal with you, then then that's a different matter. But if they are unprepared to deal with you, Daioni can take on, like, you can throw a Daioni at a whole army and it'll wipe the field with it. Especially if you have a good amount of gear on them, and if you're prepared and you have good research objectives. So, a couple of Daioni at the beginning of the game, early on in your first war, year 1, year 2, that type of thing, a handful of Daioni with a base amount of gear and the right research objectives can carry you to victory, unless you are going up against an individual that's like, I am not getting caught with my pants down versus a Daioni. I have sacred units or big units that can hit really hard and kill the Daioni, and I have magic weapons or the ability to do evocations that are going to kill the Daioni afterwards, right? In the spirit form. So Daioni, really, 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 really cool. Probably the main reason that you're playing Yomi, if you're playing Yomi. Very, very neat. I think we can probably end there. They do have Oni Summoner 50, which is twice the amount of Oni summoning as the Oni Shugo. I don't know that that actually works that way, by the way. I don't know that this is a percentage. I think it is. I think this is a percentage chance to summon an additional Oni per turn. But there are multiple procs for this. Or there's some weird ways that the free spawn works. We'll go over that more when we actually get to the free spawn section. So, anyways, that is the Daioni, which is the last recruitable commander for Yomi. Very, very, very strong unit. Very, very cool unit. And probably the main focus for the nation. Main reason why you would want to play Yomi. I think, so here's one thing to point out that I didn't really talk about. We talked a lot about, like, what are the cool things about, like, Oni Shugo or Daionis, or what are they good at, or things like that. This tag, the demon tag, is an Achilles heel, by the way. So they have things like need not eat, right? They don't have to deal with supply issues. They're very strong. They're really cool. They cause unrest. They have chaos power. They have all this great shit, right? But the demon tag, it can really get them screwed over, because it allows things that hit demons, magic specific to demons, to work against them, and weapons. Forged weapons that are anti-demon weapons to work against them as well. So that's what I meant when I said, like, if your opponent is prepared or knows what they're doing, they're going to have the tools to be able to deal with you. So you're gonna have to factor that into how you are dealing with people. You're gonna have to keep an eye out for things like holy scourges. Or what's the other one? Like the claymores, I think are another thing that they have. The fire claymores, not the fire brands, but the I don't know. But so you're gonna have to keep an eye out for individuals that have that type of stuff, or individuals that have you take like that have summons that are good against demons, or water nations that have access to things like demon cleansing, right? Or just nations that have very good priests, or access to a lot of priests, because they can just use banishment on your people, right? So those are all things that you need to keep in mind when you are deciding what you're going to do with Yomi and your units. Okay, so next up, we're going to want to talk about the free spawn for Yomi. All right, so it is time to talk about the free spawn that Yomi gets. And I've gone back to the IllWiki page for Yomi, and this is all of the stuff on the free spawn. So I'm just going to read through some of this. I'm not going to read through all of it, but Oni will appear in all temples that are inside Yomi's dominion. So putting down temples is very important, okay? A high turmoil scale will increase the number of Oni that spawn in the temples. So you want to have turmoil on your scales, okay? The spawn rate is not affected by your dominion strength, but you do have to have at least one. It has to be in your dominion, or else they're not going to spawn. Location of the temple determines what type of Oni might appear. Mountains or highlands are required to get the most powerful types. I think caves are also pretty useful as well in that particular situation. So, things like plains, forests, swamps, wastelands, right? Those are all not going to get you the most powerful summons that you can get. You want mountains, highlands, and caves, right? Cold or warm provinces can spawn 2 different variants of Oni. And then temples in temperate provinces without mountains or highlands will only produce Ko-Oni, and we'll talk about what that actually means here in a second. So, basically, what this sentence is saying is that it's not super worth it to worry about non-mountain or highland provinces unless you just really need to. Okay. Disciples do not get the Dominion feature, so that's good to know. And then we got all of this other stuff. So there is a special spell, a national spell that Yomi gets called End of Culture. That increases the effective free spawn rate. So basically doubles, I think, the way that the amount of free spawn that you can get. But the math behind the free spawn is actually pretty complicated, while the number of spawn attempts are greater than 0. So every single province that you have the qualifying factors in can spawn several Oni in it each turn. And there's a lot going on with each of them. So we're gonna jump back over to the actual game, and I have booted up a test game that I have where I've cheated out of my gourd to get where we are. And we're going to take a look at actually all of the free spawns. So, I have... this game is 35 turns in. And this is the amount of free spawn that I have generated in the 35 turns on my capital. I have moved none of the stuff from it. So, I want you to keep that in mind. We have... We'll just start with the base unit. So Ko-Onis are the weakest of the free spawn that you can generate, okay? You can generate Ko-Onis anywhere. Anywhere that you have a temple that is in your dominion, okay? They have low HP. They are undisciplined. But they are size 1. And they actually have decent stats, considering what they are, like strength 13, attack 14, skill 15. I say that, but this is not true. They have chaos power 1, right? So, this is a base 10 strength with chaos power plus 3, right? So this is 10, 11, 12, which still isn't bad, right? Like, base 10 strength, base 11 attack, base 12 defense. That's not bad for something that you're getting for free. So, low HP, high attack density, potentially decently high damage, right? This club does 16 damage based off of our current strength, right? And the other thing to like really keep in mind is these guys, they have a second form, right? So if their body is slain, they will turn into an ethereal version of themselves, and you got to kill them again. So, even though they are low HP, low protection, if they are up against something that doesn't have banishment, doesn't have magic evocations, or doesn't have magic weapons, even if they get killed, they can actually still survive a lot longer. And as long as their spirit form survives, they survive the battle, right? So these guys have a surprising amount of longevity considering what they are. You also get a shit ton of them, okay? So again, this is in our capital. Our capital currently has a crazy amount of unrest, which you would not want. But over the course of 35 turns, I generated, how much is this? We've got 85. We generated 295 of these Ko-Oni in 35 turns. So that's a fair amount. You would have more. We'll talk more about like strategies for doing this properly after we go through all the free spawn, but you would have more in a province if you were doing it properly in a shorter amount of time. But that is kind of about what you can what you can expect, okay? Next up, this is the next type of free spawn unit. It is the Aka Oni. So the Aka Oni is one of the two types of temperature-based Oni. They are the warm-based Oni rather than the cold-based Oni. So they have a few more hit points compared to the Ko-Onis at 14. They are size 2, so they have less attack density. They are still undisciplined, so they still have that as an issue. This one has experience, so we're going to have to keep that in mind. They have a base of 13 strength, base of 11 attack, and base of 9 defense. So they're kind of an inverted form of the Ko-Oni. They have worse defensive statistics, but they have better offensive statistics, okay? They hit way fucking harder. They have a great club instead of a club, so it's a two-handed version. They hit way harder than the Ko-Oni do, and they actually have a ranged attack where they throw flames, and this is interesting because it is armor piercing and because it is magic, right? So that can be very, very useful. And then again, of course, in Chaos Power, these guys can hit really pretty hard. So they also have fire resistance, which can be useful for some fire tricks that you might try to do later on in the game. So pretty cool unit overall. We did not get very many of them. We only got 22 here in our capital in the last 35 turns. You tend to get more of these. I don't know why we only got 22. I would probably expect to get more, about like 50 or so, right? Over the course of that amount of turns. The alternative to them, it's probably because we don't have full heat scales here all the time, but the alternative to them is this guy, the Owl Oni. So they have pretty much the same stats, right? HP 14, 13 strength, 11 attack, 10 defense. Actually, I think they're slightly... No, 9 defense. Yeah. But instead of having the fire resistance, they have cold resistance. And honestly, I hear most people like prefer the Aka Oni. I actually think the Owl Oni might be a little better because... So these guys have a cold ability, and it's not ranged, it's in melee, but it can fatigue out thugs and other super combatants, right? And I find it's actually pretty useful for that type of stuff. The only issue, I guess, is the fact that getting them means that you have to go cold scales, and going cold scales is a little bit of a pain in the ass on Yomi. But I don't know, like I don't have enough experience with them. I've never gone them in a multiplayer game. I've gone them in a single player game, and they seem just fine. But I don't know. I would love to hear someone's thoughts on how useful the Ao Oni actually are. But anyways, yeah. So that's the very you either get the Ao Oni in cold scales or you get the Aka Oni in heat scales. Okay. So next up we have that is like just destroying my throat there. We have a good example here. Right. So Ko-Oni, right? These guys you can get anywhere. Okay. Anywhere that you have a temple and your dominion. Aka Oni or Ao Oni, you can get anywhere that you have a temple and your dominion, and that has either hot scales or cold scales. Okay? The rest of the Onis that you can get have to come from either a highland, mountain, or cave. And they are broken into 3 types. So we only have 2 types here, but the other type is right here. They are very, 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 very rare. So we'll go over these. So the more common version is just the base Oni. Okay, so these guys have quite a bit more HP than the other ones, right? 24 HP is pretty high. They are size 3, so not as good attack density as the Ko-Onis or even the Aka-Onis, right? But holy shit, they hit really hard, right? Base of 16 strength, so 19 strength in Turmoil 3. They have this two-handed Nodachi that has it just slaps, right? These things can chop through a lot of stuff. They can chop through thugs, like actual thugs, geared out thugs, buffed up thugs. They can actually hit super combatants if the super combatant is not like it's not a super late game, you don't have a lot of gear going on with them or something like that. Onis can actually put the hurt on them. They're very good against things like giants or shit like that, right? Onis can cut through a lot of those types of things. And then they come with all of the regular stuff that you're used to from demons already. They are undisciplined, they cause unrest, they have a spirit form, right? So they're pretty good. The only issue is that they're pretty rare, right? Even after, 35 turns, we have 10 of them here. So again, you can get more of them in a properly set up province, but these guys you're never gonna have hundreds of them, but you might have little contingents of 30 or 40 of them here or there, right? And then, so aside from the Oni, you have their slightly better versions, the Kuro Oni, which are almost identical, really, excepting that they have the ability to throw flames and spit poison. And with that comes some fire resistance and some poison resistance. And these guys are pretty badass. They're basically an upgrade almost in every way. The only aside that I can say is that sometimes you'll get into a situation where you don't want them throwing flames or spitting poison, and because they're undisciplined, you can't do anything about it, right? So that's the only kind of like downside to them, is that you have no control over them because they are demons. They also look really fucking cool. I love their model. But yeah, so along with the Onis, the Kuro Onis are really, really good, really solid upgrades from the Aka Onis, and they slap. I think a very key thing to remember with all of the Onis is they hit really hard for what they are. Even the Ko-Onis at size 1, they hit really hard for a size 1 unit, right? The Aka Onis hit really hard for a size 2 free spawn unit. the Onis hit incredibly hard for a size 3 free spawn unit, right? Very, very good. And then the last free spawn unit that you can get is incredibly rare, so rare that you really can't rely on them, and that is the Amano Jaku. And I'm probably mispronouncing a lot of these things, but these guys are basically Onis that are suited up, right? They're Onis that are sacred, that are more badass, that are ready to kick ass comparatively. They have just slightly better stats, just a little bit more HP, etc. But the real thing about them is that they have heavy armor, whereas none of the other Onis have any armor, period. But they have heavy samurai armor, which is pretty good, right? And they're sacred. So, because Oni Shugo and Daioni are so good, you are kind of encouraged to take a decent bless on Yomi, so that you can make use of it on your Oni Shugo and Daioni. The Amanojaku, even though you're never going to have a crazy amount of them, I've played games where I played Yomi for like 50, 60, 70 turns, right? And ended up with 10 or 15 Amano Jaku ever, period, right? Like across the board. But if you have a good bless, you can kind of turn them into this little cool elite badass unit that you can put on a flank or in a center somewhere, and in this big fight, this unit might be able to carry the day for you. I don't know that that's actually going to be the case. I wish that there was a way where you could get more Amano Jakus, or if you could like encourage them more. I feel like this is kind of a limited thing from Yomi. I wish there was something that you could do about it, because this is a really cool unit. But yeah, that's it. You're not going to get very many of them. So that is the free spawn. That's what you can get as free spawn. So let's take this, take a moment to actually kind of like talk about. I wonder if they have any more. No, they have general concepts here. I need cough drop. So let's take a little bit of a second and talk about some of the strategies behind getting free spawns. We're going to go up here to the spawn number attempts. Okay, so in order to get free spawn, this is how the game checks it. And bear with me on this because I'm not 100%, okay? The number of spawn attempts that you have in each province is equal to the turmoil of that province plus 1. So it's a max of 4 when you're at turmoil 3. If you have end of culture up, it becomes 2 times turmoil plus 1. So max of 7, okay? So think of it like this. You have a pool of 7 attempts. Every turn, it is going to do a number of checks to see what you spawn, okay? That check, right, is going to be 66% of the time it's just going to flat out fail and you're going to get nothing, okay? And that's going to be a -1. So you'll have you'll be sitting at 4, you check, you get a 66% chance, you get nothing. Okay, so you're sitting at 3, you get another 66% chance. Now you get nothing. You're sitting at 2. You get past the 66% chance. Okay, great, cool, whatever. If you have so past the 66% chance, it actually goes from a order of most rare to least rare from the spawn chance. So if you succeed, it's going to try to figure out what did you get, okay? and you have a very, very, very low percent chance, right, to spawn a Amano Jaku. And if you do get an Amano Jaku, that takes 2 of your attempts rather than just 1. Okay? You have a much better chance of getting a Kuro Oni, and then an even better chance of getting a regular Oni. I don't know why this says 80%, 25%, 70%, 4%. This math I do not think is correct. Like if we flip back over here, for example, like I say that, but so yeah, I don't know, actually. I have tended to find that you will get more Oni than you will Kuro Oni, but I haven't found that you get far more Oni than Kuro Oni. So this sounds right like you should be getting way more Kuro Oni than you are Oni. I've not found that to be the case. So, anyways, if you do not get any of these special, or you do not qualify to get any of these special Oni, or you don't get any of these special Oni, you also have a 30% chance per cold scale to get an Ao Oni, a 30% chance per heat scale to get an Aka Oni, and if none of that is the case, right? Like if you don't get any of these, or you just don't win the lottery on that, you will instead get a Ko-Oni, and you'll get 1d4 non-exploding Ko-Oni. So you can, in a very short amount of time, if you get very lucky, get a shit ton of Ko-Oni really, really, really quickly. Now, generating these Oni throughout your provinces, we've talked about the concept that, right, like, you're going to be generating unrest in all of the locations that you have Oni, okay? So what that typically means is that means that you don't want to keep Oni in a location that you want the income of. So, for example, in our capital over here, we have unrest 407 because we're generating 0.1 unrest off of nearly 300 Ko-Oni every turn. 0.3 unrest off of 20 something so you would see what I'm saying, right? You want to house your Oni in low population, or at least low income provinces that you don't care about. Preferably, honestly, is how this ends up being. You want to house them in highlands, mountains, or caves, right? The other alternative is housing them in low population places like swamps or wastelands, because they don't need to eat, so they don't care about the supply usage there, right? It can also be a very good idea to house them in choke points so that people can't get through those choke points without having to deal with them. And then, so I've heard this talked about, and I don't know if there's some math behind this that I'm not aware of, or if this has been disproven or what, but I've heard about the concept that you get more the higher the unrest is. I don't think that is the case. But what will tend to happen is if you are, for instance, I'm gonna house all my Oni in the range of light, and I'm gonna house my Oni in Stinging Swamp and in Cliff Coast, right? What will tend to happen is you will have those provinces have a bunch of unrest, and they will also be where you are getting the majority of your spawns from. But I think that's I think that's um shit. What's the phrase I'm looking for? It's coincidence. It's not causation, right? So anyways, that's kind of how free spawn work. So yeah. Trying to get rid of this off drop. I apologize. I've been trying to put off doing this video for a while now, but I keep getting sick off and on over the course of the past like 2 months, and I just can't put it off anymore. I have to do it. So normally I would avoid trying to do this type of thing because I know it can be annoying for people to have to deal with me being sick. But yeah, anyways. Let's take a look. We're done with respawn now. Let's take a look at national spells. So, Yomi has a number of national summons spells that are in the conjuration tree. And then they have 2 level 0 spells that they start with that we'll discuss. And then they also have a Thaumaturgy 6 spell, the End of Culture. And an Alteration 6 spell, the End of Weakness. So, let's go over End of Weakness and End of Culture real quick. We've already kind of mentioned End of Culture. End of Culture is Thaumaturgy 6, Fire 5. So, difficult to get unless you get lucky or you're trying to, or you build for it, right? Because you can get Fire 3s on your Daionis commonly. You can get a Fire 4 rarely on a Daioni. And getting a Fire 4 can get you up to Fire 5 with boosters, but otherwise it can be kind of tough to do that unless you come in knowing, hey, I want to put up End of Culture, I'm going to prepare for this, right? So 5 is a little rough. 60 fire spells. This is a global. 60 fire spells, which is pretty hefty. And this thing will basically, it just basically doubles the spawn rate of your Oni, but not just the spawn rate from your regular temple checks. It also doubles the spawn rate from your Oni generals. So your Oni Shugo that have that 25% summoning, and then your Daionis that have that 50% summoning, it's gonna increase their ability to summon as well. So Invoculture actually will increase your ability to free spawn by quite a bit. Now, I think there's still an argument to be made that it's not necessarily that it's not universally useful, right? Some matchups that you have, your free spawn aren't gonna be very good. So putting this up wouldn't be very beneficial in those matchups. But most of the time, End of Culture is going to be something that you'll probably want to work towards because it can increase the amount of free spawn that you have, which can increase the amount of pressure and the size of armies that you can field on the battlefield. So it's pretty cool. Next up is the level 6 alteration End of Weakness. So this is only an Earth 2, which is really, really easy to cast. And it costs 1 Earth Gem. And all it does is it is a battlefield enchantment that gives all demons Barkskin. So this is actually relatively useful. It comes pretty early on comparatively. So you would already have access to stuff like Wooden Warriors, but you can't really cast that very well. And it is a research level before Marble Warriors, right? And it is 2 research levels before Mass Protection. So it does the effect of Mass Protection, which you can't cast. Granted, it only does it to, or no, it's a research level before Mass Protection. My bad. This is somewhat useful against the right enemies. So, against enemies that have really massable troops that don't hit really hard, and that don't use a lot of fire evocations, End of Weakness can be a really great boon, especially since you can kind of get it relatively early on, because it adds a layer of durability to your free spawns, to your demons, that they otherwise would not have. Um, and that can make them a lot tougher to kill, especially when they're in their spirit forms, right? Uh, but if you're up against an enemy that hits really hard, it doesn't really do much. If you're up against an enemy that uses a lot of fire or has heat auras or uses fire elementals or things like that, this is actually a detriment. You don't want to use it, right? So End of Weakness is a very situational spell. Against the right opponent, it can really, 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 really be helpful. Against the wrong opponent, it can actually hurt you. So you got to be careful with this one, but it's good to keep in mind. And then we have all of the national summons. There are a lot of national summons. I have summoned all of the national summons, so we'll actually take a look at each of them. But before we get to them, I want to talk about Hanya Pact and Greater Hanya Pact. So we talked earlier about the Naminari. We'll go actually pop over here real quick to our capital. Not our capital, I lied. So right here, we have a Naminari, right? So that Naminari has been boosted. Ignore that Naminari. So we have this Naminari right here, right? Is a death, nature, pretty simple stuff right out of the gate. 65 gold, easy peasy. So, Naminaris can, from the very beginning of the game, for 6 death gems, you can cast Hanya Pact with a Naminari, in which the Naminari will seal a pact with the Oni Kings and give up her humanity to become a Chunari. So, she is going to add power in death and gain power in fire, but she will lose her humanity for it. What does that mean? What it means is she will go from this death 1, nature 1 into a fire 1, death 2, nature 1. And you'll see she has these little horns coming out of her head as she becomes more demonic. And she actually becomes a demon. So she's going to get a little bit more vitality out of that, a little bit more survivability, some fire resistance and some poison resistance, and she's going to become a fire mage, death mage, or death 2 mage. Most people see this and they're like, that's amazing. I want to do that constantly. That is absolutely awesome. Here's the problem. 1, it costs 6 death gems. And 6 death gems isn't a crazy amount, but it's not an insubstantial amount, okay? The other thing is keep in mind, Yomi is starved from an income standpoint. Minus 25% income, has to deal with unrest, has to deal with turmoil. The Naminari costs 52 gold per year. 52 gold per year is... let's check this real quick. That is 4.3 gold per month per Naminari. Okay? Which is fine. That is not an issue. What is an issue is the Chunari costs 124 gold per year. So you are paying over double the upkeep per year, plus 6 death gems to get Fire 1, which really doesn't matter at all, right? And Death 2. Death 2 is nice, but you already have access to Death 2 on all of your Oni Shugo, on some of your sorcerers, and on all of your Daionis. So you're not getting anything new from the Chunari, excepting that you are getting the higher death nature crosspath and the fire nature crosspath. I'm not aware of anything that's going to be super useful for that, but if you have a particular strategy or a concept in mind that uses those cross paths, then perhaps that could be a really big thing for you. Now, you can take this a step further, and from the Hanya pack, you can spend 12 death gems, and a Chunari can do a second and final pact with the Oni Kings and become a Hanya, right? So the Hanya gets more death and fire, a fiery aura, and a serpent tail. So the Chunari isn't really worth it. Is the Hanya worth it? So now we are sitting at 18 HP, more robust stats. We get a butt ton more fire resistance and poison resistance. We get a heat aura, which is kind of interesting. And we're now fire 2, death 3, nature 1. Now these caster levels are nothing to sneeze at. Death 3 is great. Fire 2 is pretty good. You can do a fair amount of good things with fire 2. But the problem, again, lies in what does it cost? So at this point, it will have cost you 18 death gems to get a Hanya. You're not getting anything from a path perspective that you don't already have access to. You have death 3, you have fire 2. The only thing you're getting is the death nature and fire nature cross paths, if that is something that you need, which is you really don't, right? And it costs you 204 gold per year. Now, I will say, if you are going to go for a Chunari, you might as well go for a Hanya, because what you are getting from a Hanya for the price of 204 gold per year is significantly better than what you're getting from a Chunari for the price of 124 gold per year, right? So, if you're gonna do it, do it. Like, go the whole way and do it, right? But I have found that it is too expensive and not worthwhile enough to go for multiple Hanya. I mean, so think of it this way, right? Like, this Hanya is 204 gold per year. This Daioni is less upkeep, 196 gold per year. So this Hanya is Fire 2, Death 3, Nature 1. This Daioni is Fire 3, Earth 2, Death 3, Priest, crazy stats, etc., and less upkeep cost, right? So on a nation that is already starved for gold, I just can't find a situation where you really care about making Hanya. Now, if for whatever reason you're in a situation where money doesn't matter and death gems don't really matter, then sure, by all fucking means, right? Like, produce Hanya to your heart's content. They are mages that can survive a lot of the late game crazy shit that would normally come out, and they're really powerful, but they're really costly. So more often than not, my statement would be there's no reason to use Chunari or Hanya. I'd be really interested to hear from people who have, like, actually you can use them for this specific thing and they're super valuable for it. Let me know. Okay, so let's take a look at actual spells. So at level 1 Conjuration, we get Summon Kappa. Okay, you cost 3 water gems. You summon 3 Kappa. Can't be cast underwater. Okay, we don't have any water. All right. So right out of the gate, that is a bit of a problem. Where did I actually do this? Did I do this here? Oh, no, I did this over here. So yeah, we don't have any water. Cannot be cast underwater. Yeah, okay. We don't have any water. The only way you're gonna get this is if you get lucky on finding some sort of random indie mage, or you get a lucky event or something like that, or if you boost a Nominari who already has nature, right? So this is very unlikely for you to do, but if you do it, you get access to these guys. Kappas, HP 15, Strength 13, Protection 15, otherwise unremarkable. They are amphibians, they have recuperation, and they have land encumbrance. So they actually fatigue out really fast when they're fighting on land. They have 2 attacks, a claw and a kopo. So if you if you if you luck out, or if you have some sort of specific plan and you can get access to water nature early on, you can produce a fair amount of these guys, and they can actually take on underwater indies fairly well. They're not going to take on underwater nations very well, but they can take on underwater indies fairly well. So if you need to, you can use these guys to get into the water. The thing about it is, though, is Yomi is a high death nation, so you're already going to have access to things like Long Dead and just, Mound Kings and things like that. So you can already kind of do shit like that, where you just send large contingents of undead into the water to try to, like, take the water for you. I've never found a situation where I'm like, yes, Kappa are the way, Kappa are going to save the day. No. So this is not a very exciting one for me. Next up, we have level 2. We have Karasu Tengus, which is nature and air. Again, this is not a cross path that we naturally have, so you're going to have to boost into this, or you're going to have to get lucky, or you're going to have to have a plan. But for 3 nature gems, you can get 3 Karasu Tengus. So, what are Karasu Tengus? Karasu Tengus are these guys. They are decent HP, relatively okay stats, high attack, high defense, okay? They are sacred, flying, storm immune, basically bird samurais, which is pretty cool. They have a lightning strike, but they only have 1 ammunition for it. So what they tend to do is they throw out their lightning strikes in a volley, and then they fly up and land on their hopefully stunned enemies, right? The issue is trying to get enough of these to do anything, because, again, you don't have the air and nature cross paths. So unless you have a big plan, or you luck into some situation pretty early on, you're never gonna have a crazy amount of these. But these guys can be kind of like storm demons, right? Where you can have 20 or 30 of them, and having 20 or 30 of them present in a big battle, especially a battle that you know storm is gonna go up in, and especially if they're a surprise, or if you know the enemy doesn't have an answer to them, then these guys can actually, throw out a lightning strike, fly up during a storm, and wreak havoc on the back lines of your enemy. If you have a good bless that goes with them as well, then that can be another really good factor. The problem is most of the time when you take a bless for Yomi, you're going to be taking a bless that is more focused on keeping your Oni Shugo or Daioni alive, and that type of bless tends to not benefit the Karasu Tengu very much, right? So that type of bless might be a regeneration bless or an awe bless. I guess an awe bless kind of helps the Karasu Tengu. Obviously, any bless helps, right? But Karasu Tengu, you would be more along the lines of, like, I want to be quickened, or I want to have, like, thunder weapons, or, like, Karasu Tengu they're more designed on the concept of, like, we're going to dive bomb you, we're gonna concord you, that type of situation. We're gonna Nazca you, that scenario, right? So while they are sacred, don't look at this and be like, oh yeah, I'm gonna make a build out of this, and we're gonna produce a crazy amount of Karasu Tengu. That's gonna be very, very difficult to do because you don't have the cross path, and for what it's worth, you tend to not get I mean, I guess you could get a lot of nature gems if you're site searching a bunch with Naminaris, but you know, you're not generally a nature nation. So, aside from the Karasu Tengus, you have Konoha Tengus. Konoha Tengus are easier for you to get because we do have access to air earth in two ways. We have air earth through our sorcerers, right? Our sorcerers can get they start as earth and they can get an air random. And our Daionis, though I don't think you would really want to use Daionis for this purpose. So, Konoha Tengus are, you get 5 air gems for 5 plus Konoha Tengus. So, Konoha Tengus are pretty interesting. Because I have them up here. Yeah, so they're these guys. They have worse stats than the Karasu Tengus do. They have less HP and they have worse stats generally across the board. They have the same abilities. They are Sacred Flying and they have Storm Immunity. And they also have the Singular Lightning Strike. I think they have a better Katana, maybe? No, they're just worse across the board. So Konoha Tengu are just worse across the board compared to Karasu Tengu, but they are way easier for you to accomplish. These guys you could potentially do something with consistently. The only problem with them is they cost 5 air gems, and that's pretty expensive. Air gems are typically pretty rare, typically pretty valuable. So, generally speaking, I would say if you come into a game as Yomi and you're like, my goal is going to be Konoha Tengus and I have a concept of how I'm going to make them work, then they can be great. Otherwise, you generally just have a situation where you're like, I'm gonna put a batch of like 20 Konoha Tengus over in this army just to like mess with someone. Otherwise, you tend to not use them too terribly much, but they can be a mid to late game use for air gems and be pretty helpful. And next up in the same level, level 3 Conjuration, we have Ambush of Tigers. So this is 2 nature. We only have access to nature 1. So you're going to have to boost or get lucky or come prepared for use for this. Costs 10 nature gems. And for that 10 nature gems, you get 10 plus tigers. So, here are the tigers. They're just base tigers. So if you find tiger in any other nation, or anybody else has the ability to do this, this is the exact same tiger. They are decently high hit points. They are okay stats, but they are beasts. They are undisciplined, and that's it, right? Like, they can be okay as a flanking unit if you really need to. The thing is typically if you've gotten to the point of desperation to need to spend 10 nature gems on chaff like this, then the game's probably already over for you. But in the right situations, right, an extra 10, 20, 30 tigers, maybe that actually makes the difference for you. The only problem is getting to that point means you kind of have to have already invested in nature, because you've already going to have to have boosted a Neminari, or you're going to have later on in the game, maybe you got like a Fairy Queen or something like that. However you got there, right? Because these guys are nature 2, it's gonna take a little bit more than what you as a nation, Yomi, have access to compared to other nations, like other nature nations. So more often than not, you don't have a very good use for tigers. Next up, we have level 4, Summon Shikome. Okay, so these are Death 2, 8 Death Gems for 8 summons. So, Shikome are actually really interesting. They are these ladies right here. Shikome are hags of the underworld. They are decent HP, okay stats, size 2, sacred demons that have berserker for and ghost rending claws, and the ghost rending basically is they have an extra effect where they can paralyze the dead, I guess. I don't know. It only affects undead units. So these, the only issue with these is that they don't hit really hard, right? These claws are relatively weak. They are better than you might think because you have Berserker 4. So when these ladies go Berserk, they're actually hitting at 16, right? Rather than 12. And they take a bless. So, again, this is one of those situations of if you are going a big bless on Yomi, more often than not, it is designed for your Oni Shugo or your Daioni, rather than something like your Tengus or your Shikomes. But I think it is possible to actually go for a build where you are designing something for your Shikomes or your Tengus. I think Shikomes are one of the easier things to use. Because if you can do that, these things actually slap. Like, I've never experienced it myself, so I do not know if it is effective in a multiplayer situation. But I would be really interested to see if people have tales of buffing up their Shikomes. You can now, don't get me wrong, eight death gems is not a pittance, right? That's a fair amount, but you get 8 units out of that, so that's pretty good. And death 2 is very, very, very easy for you to achieve. So you can go from having no Shikomes to all of a sudden having a shit ton of Shikomes. And if if you rush this Conjuration level 4, it's, early game, you have you're maybe like turn 15, 16, you've started up your first war, you're raiding around with a Daioni or two, and then all of a sudden you hit level 4 Conjuration and you go, okay, this is the turn, and you go, I'm going to drop the 50 death gems that I've banked since the start of the game. All of a sudden, boom, you have, 40-ish Shikome, and you throw them in an army with a bunch of other Ko-Oni or what have you, and you put them all on one flank, and you have your prophet there to bless them up. These can just destroy that first war with you, especially if your opponent is not expecting them, right? If your opponent's not expecting them, even if you don't bless them, or don't have a bless specifically for them, you still have a bless that's for your like Oni Shugo or Daioni, right? Again, they're still going to get benefits from that bless. It just might not be as good as if it was specifically designed for them. I think Shikome are really, really, really good, generally speaking. I do think they start to fade in their usefulness later on in the game as you kind of like get into the mid and late game. You can still have a lot of them, but at that point, your death gems tend to be better served doing things like immortals, like wraiths and liches and things like that, I think, than put into something like a Shikome. Again, unless your build is designed for it. But I think I wish more things were like this. This is a really useful unit. It's a really useful summons. It's situationally strong, but it's not overpowered. It's not fucking condors or anything like that, right? So I think it's really cool. So next up, other thing you get is for Death 3, which is still easily achievable, but harder. You have to do this on like a Daioni. And for 10 Death Gems, you get a Ghost General. Or a Shura. So what is a Shura? Well, this is a Shura. So Ashura is a no magic commander, HP 20, decent stats, ethereal unit. It's a ghost general, right? And the reason why this is okay is because this guy is actually a decently good general, right? He can lead 120 undead at base, and he has 80 leadership. So it's kind of a weird situation, right? You can make demon generals. They have better leadership, but they can lead fewer units. Or you can spend for a Shura that has worse leadership, but can lead more units. I tend to find that it kind of depends on the situation, right? You can boost up someone's leadership amount at the cost, like the amount of units they can lead. You can boost them, the amount of undead units they can lead. You can boost them for the cost of their actual leadership value. There's morale bonus, right? Or you can just boost the morale bonus, etc., etc. So I find when I play Yomi, I tend to get a couple Shura, but not a crazy amount of Shura. You can also, if you just have a shit ton of death gems, you can just summon these guys as raiders, as thugs. They're okay for that, but they're kind of expensive for that. 10 death gems is kind of expensive for that, and it's kind of getting to the point to where, right, like at this point you're at level 4 conjuration. I guess you could do this early on in the game if you have the amount of death gems to spend, but you don't have the research to get to things like wraith lords or liches, right? So that's an option. Next up, we have Dai Tengu at level 5 conjuration. This is more difficult for us to cast. We can't get this out of the gate unless we get very, very lucky on a Daioni. A Daioni that gets 2 air randoms, which is just incredibly rare, can summon this out of the gate. Otherwise, you're going to have to either do it on a god, or you're going to have to empower someone, like a Daioni or a sorcerer, okay? But when you cast it, you get a couple of different things. You get the actual Daitengu, which is a Daitengu commander. You get 10 Tengu warriors. You get 15 Karasu Tengus. And yeah, that's pretty nice. So you get these guys, and we've seen Karasu Tengus. They are exactly the same. Tengu warriors are slightly different. These are the only way you can get Tengu warriors. These are neither Karasu Tengus or Konoha Tengus, but they are basically the same. They have no real special thing to set them apart, just slightly different stats. They have all the same abilities, the same effective skills, etc. They're just slightly different. So whatever. I guess the big difference is they have better protection, right? They have some actual protection with the samurai armor, but I mean, whatever. And what you get is you get this Dai Tengu, who is a Air 3, Earth 1, Nature 1. Okay HP, but pretty low HP considering how much you have to spend for him. You have to spend 55 air gems for this guy, right? Only way to get him, you can't get him separately. You have to get him as part of the army, right? Okay stat line. And other than that, nothing really special to set him apart, excepting that he is a priest too. So, if that is something that you really, really need, or if you have the air gems, but you don't have, like, nature gems, right? Like, you need to get to... So, let me double check this, right? So, he will get you to air 3, right? If you need to get up to air 3, but you don't have the nature gems or the nature path to get a fairy queen, right, which is also air 3, then you could instead go the Daitengu route, which also gets you, it'll get you this mage, this caster, but it'll also get you a couple of Tengu as well to utilize in your army. It's just really expensive. It's really expensive. If you are the luckiest person in the world, I find I have air gems and fire gems the fewest most often. But if you are the luckiest person in the world and you have just buku amount of air gems, summon Daitengu to your heart's content. Otherwise, you might end up using a Daitengu. You might summon one Daitengu just to have it. But more often than not, I find that unless you have a Tengu-focused strategy, this ends up being skipped. Next up is the Nushi, which is another very strange one, right? It's water 2, which we have no water. It can only be cast in swamps, and it costs 25 water. So over here I have a boosted Naminari, the same Naminari that I empowered to summon Kappas. I also summoned a Nushi with. So this is the Nushi, and it actually has... This is the Nushi, right? Its stats are very mediocre. We don't care about the stats. It is a Water 3, Death 1, Nature 2 caster, which is pretty good, right? This could actually get you into other things. So if you somehow get into a situation where you can either empower a Naminari or you get a Water Nature cross path, you can get to a Nushi, and that Nushi can go into things like streams from Hades or what have you, right? What do we got? Contact Naiad, streams from Hades, that type of stuff. So the Nushi can be useful in doing that, but they do have homesickness, so they run into the same issues that Naiads do, and yeah. They do have the ability to transform into a swamp serpent, which is really neat, but otherwise not especially useful. You can use these to, like, if, for instance, you have a really important swamp province that is very strategic, like a chokehold or a choke point or something like that, you can put a Nushi, and you have just the free ability to do it, right? You could put a Nushi in there and use them as like a Foul Vapors caster, whereas something you normally might not have Foul Vapors in an army, you could throw that in there as kind of like this, oh hey, surprise type situation, or just be like a Water Elemental summoner or something like that. It's just this is another weird one that I feel like doesn't get a lot of use and isn't gonna get a lot of use. I gotta blow my nose. This freaking video is super long. I apologize for this. Next up, we have the Summon Gozumezu. So this costs 3, so kind of hard to do on most of your units except for Daioni unless you're using boosters. Costs 7 death gems, so not insubstantial, and it summons a ox head and a horse face. So what the fuck does that mean? I'll show you. This is these 2 units. So an ox head and a horse face. So these units are actually interesting units. They are very strong, high HP, very strong strength, decent protection, decent stats, period, right? Units. The Oxhead is a jailer and guardian demon of the underworld, right? And then the Horseface is the same. So, what are these units? Why would you want them? They're not sacred. There's only 2 of them for 7 gems. That's really inefficient for the fact that they require a death 3. Well, it all basically lies in this Soul Catcher weapon. So the Soul Catcher weapon is is basically a soul slay. So Soul Catcher, if you are having to deal with thugs or super combatants, it is not a horrible idea to summon a couple of ox heads and horse faces here or there and mix them into your patrols, because these guys, especially against an unsuspecting player, a thug who normally just like deletes all of your PD or your patrols or whatever, an Oxhead or Horseface can walk up to them and go swat, and then all of a sudden that thug goes delete. So that's really all you would want to do. Again, I guess if it's a scenario where if you are just rolling in death gems and you can do whatever you want, and you have the ability to, you could create armies of these guys, and they are very strong, and they will take blesses, or not a bless, they will take buffs very well, like Army of Lead, Regeneration. They'll take those very, very well. So if you can afford it, these aren't bad. It's just they're expensive and they're turn inefficient, right? But they're really neat. They're really neat. And then the last summons that we have, the last national spell for Yomi is the Araburu. Araburu? I don't know. I don't do pronunciations. Araburu Kami, which is Death 1, Fire 1, and 5 Death Gems. This is actually really easy to cast. A fair number of your Oni Shugos are going to be able to cast this. A fair number of your Sorcerers are going to be able to cast this. All of your Daioni are going to be able to cast this. This is pretty easy. It summons an Araburu Kami, a malign and violent god sent to Yomi for its bad manners. So what does that actually mean? It means you get this guy. So this is an Araburu Kami. High HP, very good stats, very good base protection, a enchanted Nodachi, sacred unit with Awe 2, poison resistance, chaos power. This is an amazing unit. The problem is it's Conjuration 7 before you get it. You only get one of them for 5 death gems, and you only get one of them per cast. So it's super duper gem inefficient. It's super duper turn inefficient, and it's pretty late to get to it. So you would have to have a plan, or this is where I could actually see this happening. I can't see a plan really working for these guys, right? I can't see a scenario where you're like, yes, I know exactly how I am going to get to Conjuration 7 in enough time to get a lot of these guys and trounce someone with them. I just don't see that working. But what I do see working is if you are playing Yomi in a game and the game has kind of stalled out, and you're going past turn 100, that type of situation, you can create an Araburu factory where you are producing 5 or 6 of these a turn, right? Especially if you get up something like Well of Misery. And then you can use that to create this incredibly elite army that is gonna fuck, basically. Especially, again, if you have, these are sacred, so if you have a good bless, and this is kind of a new thing. If you have a good bless that is good for your Oni Shugo and for your Daioni, it's also going to be good for your Araburu, right? Because these things operate in the exact same way as your Oni Shugo or your Daioni. So if you have the ability, if you go really late and you have the ability to start to produce a fair amount of these, having 20, 30, 40 of these in a big battle can be a really big thing, because they are only size 2. You can get pretty good attack density with them. They have very good stats. They have Awe. They'll take a good bless. They're very buffable, right? Like putting Army of Lead on these guys is, oh my goodness, really strong. It's just, again, so turn inefficient and so gem inefficient that I've never seen a situation where you can actually make these. So that is it for the national spells. All right, before I'm spiraling out. And I think that is mostly it for Yomi. So, we're going to do one last little thing. I'm going to view Pretender Gods. And I'm going to show you, this is the Pretender God that we inherited for this game. To my understanding, right? When I subbed in, I didn't actually spend a lot of time discussing things with the player that I inherited from. So I might have gotten this a little wrong, because I don't know if they obviously I can replicate the bless very easily, and I can replicate the scales for the most part correctly. But I don't know if they took the god awake or dormant or what have you. I'm just kind of assuming, based off of what I know and kind of like what I'm able to determine. I believe they took the god awake. It is an idol of men. The scales were something along these lines, right? Like Dominion 5, because we don't have recruitable summons, so we don't care that much about our Dominion, and higher Dominion doesn't give us more free spawn, so again, we don't care about our Dominion that much. We just have to have some of it. Turmoil 3, which is exactly what we want. We have base productivity because we do want some productivity, but we don't care about having actual productivity versus sloth. Heat 3, growth 3, luck 3. I like growth. Obviously, I like growth 3. I like luck 3. I like luck 3 a lot in conjunction with turmoil 3. But then magic, drain 3, which I really dislike. I wish that the player had. So I think he went awakened. I wish the player had gone dormant, or not dormant. What's the in between? Is it a sleep, right? Or it's dormant. Imprisoned is the worst one. So I wish the player had gone dormant, but then not gone drain 3, and just like toughed it out the first year or so, because drain 3 is really hard to deal with on Yomi. But anyways, so he went fire 7 for awe. He went air 4 for minor and major shock resistance, and then he went nature 7 for regeneration. So regeneration awe is a really potent bless on Oni Shugo and Daioni. The awe helps keep them from being killed by sacreds that have, magic weapons and things like that. And obviously the regeneration keeps them alive just generally. I don't find that it is required to do awe and regeneration for them to survive, but it is a perfectly useful bless, and the high fire, high nature allows you access to things that you otherwise might not have as Yomi. The Air 4 does pretty much the same thing, and that is very, very, very useful. And shock resistance is always useful for thugs and super combatants, meaning that you don't have to, you don't get wasted by freaking thunder strikes or lightning strikes constantly. So I think that was definitely a good pickup. And the awe and regeneration we can use. It's just maybe not the route that I would have gone. And then as an awakened pretender, this guy is basically going to, especially since we're drain 3, this guy's basically going to be all of our research for a long time. It's going to take us forever to dig ourselves out of the research hole. So that's unfortunate, but it is what we have inherited. And I'm going to go ahead and call this here. This video has already gone on way too long as it is. I went probably way more in depth than I needed to for any of this. I'm just really excited to get back into the swing of things with Dominions. The last couple months have been kind of rough on me producing Dominions content with the holidays and illness and workloads at actual work, etc. So I'm excited to get back into things. I hope that you all are going to enjoy the series, going to enjoy Yomi. I had a lot of fun playing with them. And yeah, that's going to be it for this video. We'll see you next time for the actual game. Bye-bye, everybody.
Hey everybody, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, consider leaving a like, commenting, or subscribing. It really helps me out. If you'd like to see me live, head over to my Twitch at twitch.tv/thedistanthorizon.